Well, I got a starter for you guys on a conversation about fire sprinklers, tests, and what's going on here. For commercial properties and stuff, a lot of times you find these inside. For residential homes, a lot of times you find them outside at the back of the property, opposite where the plumbing enters the dwelling.
So here's the inspector's test for a fire alarm, and for a residential, you can flush it yourself. You can also hire a company. It's about between 100 and 200 bucks for them to come out and do it, test the system. You won't have a control valve on a residential system normally. This is just for more commercial buildings and stuff. But once the flow, you'll want to check where it drains out, make sure everything's clear there, so that when you turn it on, you're not making more mess for yourself. You can kind of prevent where it's going to go a little bit. And right here is a fire bell. There's a plunger or a paddle basically in here, and that sets the fire alarm bell off that goes off outside. But anyway, the water will stink really bad because it gets trapped in there for a while, but it's a good idea again to flush it regularly to prevent clogs, and also put in fresh water in there rather than the stale stagnant water. So for fire sprinklers, kind of a good deal. And again, you hire a company to do it. It's about 100 to 200 bucks. It's a good deal.
Smells bad. Here it goes. So for commercial properties, this is something that's required yearly, annually. Same thing. Smells bad. Yearly, annually. It's a flush and a riser test, and what it does is it verifies the pressures, and it verifies that the bell rings when the water flows. But the other thing it does is it flushes the system and keeps the water from becoming corrosive, and that's pretty important. Now for residential, you can actually do the annual test yourself, or you can do it a little bit more often. If you want to. And what it does, it does a number of things. It's verifying that everything sounds properly, that the alarm goes off when it should. But the other side of it is it flushes out the water and debris to make sure there's not a clog or something that would prevent anything from putting out a fire in the event that you had a fire. But also, if something happened and it went off, then the water that's coming out of there wouldn't be so smelly and bad, because it does smell really bad because it sits in the pipes and it's kind of stagnant, and does become a little bit corrosive, but it absorbs a lot of the smells and everything else. And if you had a fire, you kind of want a little bit cleaner water or whatever to deal with the fire and put it out and save life, but can minimize some property damage and minimize the amount of the smells and everything that you have to deal with after a horrible situation anyway. But fire sprinklers, again, for residential, you can flush it yourself, and it's a test to prevent clogs, and that can prevent a lot from going wrong. But also you can hire a company to do it. It costs you between $100 and $200, probably money well spent. To do, every year, once a year, keep everything going good. And putting a fire sprinkler in can be expensive. It's now required by code. Around 2011 was when the code was put in effect that new homes are required to put in fire sprinklers. If someone was to put it in these days on a residential house, might cost around $15,000 for an install. It could lower some insurance costs, and there can definitely be life-saving benefits and insurance cost benefits and peace of mind benefits, all of those things, because a little fire does a lot of damage, and a lot of water puts out that little bit of fire. But anyway, this was just a primer discussion on fire sprinklers and what's required. Now for commercial, you can't flush them yourself. You actually have to hire a company to do it, and there's an annual test, and then there's a 5-year test on sprinkler heads themselves, which goes into much more depth. I kind of touch on that a little bit in a few different videos about making sure that when you have painters paint that they're not getting any paint on the sprinkler heads. A lot more details, but this was just a primer and a sort of discussion on fire sprinklers and things you can do to save life, property, and save some money on insurance, and and just kind of ensure that everything is working properly, save some money on maintenance costs, and all these valves and everything that they need to be worked once in a while, and doing the annual test at least that once a year the valves are being worked, so it's a good thing. Keep everything going and keep everything safe and save lives and save property, a little bit of insurance. Thanks for watching Kung Fu Maintenance, over and out. Again, this was just a primer, not the be all end all, and I'm definitely not an expert on this subject, just giving a little bit of insight on it. Thanks for watching. And there's definitely a few things that sometimes go wrong here. Sometimes the needle sticks on a gauge, and so releasing the pressure sometimes can release that. It's not necessarily, sometimes the needle gets stuck in a certain spot. 50 pounds on the low side is about, and 200 pounds on the high side. You don't want to see it go over 200 pounds. But that being said, sometimes a needle gets stuck in a particular position, and you'll get a more accurate test once you do flush the system. Sometimes the paddle gets stuck to release the fire bell. Sometimes that needs to be worked out. Also, sometimes birds build a nest inside the fire bell, so sometimes that needs to be cleaned out. Other things to watch for are leaks at the hand valves, or any kind of leaks on these fixtures, at the gauge, at the connections. But other than that, this is my primer starter conversation on the home fire sprinkler riser test. For commercial buildings, this is a once a year test that needs to happen, with a deeper 5-year test happening every 5 years. And for homes, it's something you can do yourself that you can test, but not a bad idea to hire a professional company to come and test it for you. Keep everything going
Standing on the edge of death and life, standing in between wrong and right. Light shines down, bring truth. to